Hello, agency owners. It's Charlie here, the host of the Agency Valley podcast, and today I'm bringing you an episode all about setting your agency up to sell it. Now, this is something that agency owners often don't think about until it's way too late. So I was very happy to have Stephan Spencer on the show today to take us through the journey of what it was like for him to build his agency and then set it up for sale and then to actually sell it. And there's some amazing topics that are brought up in this episode apart from just that, but he goes deep on all the things he did to really scale his agency quickly and just a lot of the mindset work that can make a huge difference. And honestly, there's so much goodies in here. I think every agency owner is going to get a ton of value from it. So if you do like this episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share it. That's enough from me. Let's head into the actual episode. Hello, agency owners. It's Charlie here, the host of the Agency Valley podcast, and today we are digging into perhaps one of the most important topics when it comes to, I'm going to say business in general, which is building up your business to be acquired, or more specifically, how to build up your agency so it can be acquired. And I have a very special guest today, Stephan Spencer, who honestly I can't sing enough praises for. Yesterday, I got around and was listening to a podcast he recorded, and it just got me even more excited for today. So Stephan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Charlie. Thanks for having me.
No, my absolute pleasure. Honestly, I'm thrilled you made the time for this because I think there's just so many good things we can talk about today that could change the lives of many agency owners out there.
Yeah, I believe so too.
Awesome. Now, what I wanted to cover today, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about, but specifically, way back in 1995, you started effectively an agency called Netconcepts, which is must have almost been like the birth of the agency scene at this point. And you went on to grow that company to a really substantial size and then sell it, which I think is a really test or the ultimate completion of the business cycle. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that story and take people through that journey.
Yeah, love to do that. Okay. So it was 1994 and I was studying for a PhD in biochemistry. So nothing to do with internet marketing. And I went to the second International World Wide Web Conference. I saw Tim Berners-Lee keynote and got to meet him briefly afterwards. That was pretty powerful. He's the inventor of the World Wide Web, for those listeners who don't recognize the name. And I also met a guy named Rob McCool, which I'm guessing nobody is going to know who that is. But you will know one of his most famous pieces of software. It's Apache. Runs most of the websites on the internet. And I met him too, and we had a really great conversation. It was at that conference, in that conversation, that I decided, I need to drop out of my PhD and start an internet company. At the time, he was the first one who told me about Netscape because he was in the process of building Netscape server. He had built the NCSA server, HTTP server, and got snapped up by Netscape when it was being formed, and the browser was being built by, what's his name? I forget his name now. He's a big VC, Mark Andreessen. And Rob McCool was building the server. So I started this agency without knowing anything about building a business. I didn't know anything about online marketing really, other than just what I was teaching myself. I built a couple of websites for fun as a PhD student, just to experiment with the web. And one of them was a bed and breakfast directory, and another one was a authors community called writers.net. So there was Insight, INNSITE, and then Writers.net. And both of them, I was able to sell both of them for 6 figures each eventually, but they were kind of made for AdSense sites is a little bit of a derogative term, but they generated a really good monthly income from AdSense and created a lot of value for people. So that was a fun little side project. But then the real money was in building the agency up. And one of the pivotal moments for the agency was it was 2001, I think, and we had been building websites, but not doing SEO as a standalone service. It was really just part of building an e-commerce website. And so when we wanted to build our brand around being an SEO consultancy in the early 2000s, then we needed a big brand to associate with that side of the business. So what we did is we went to Target, target.com, and offered to do a free SEO audit in exchange for a testimonial and the use of their logo. That was one of the smartest things we'd ever done, because once we had Target on our portfolio and on our testimonials page, everybody else fell in line. Like, everybody wanted to work with us. It was incredible. So that's a great tip. And one thing I learned, kind of the school of hard knocks way, was that initially I tried to sell the business when I got this seemingly crazy idea to move to New Zealand in 1999, 4 years into the business. So what I did was I just kind of tried to sell the business on my own so that I could move halfway around the world to New Zealand, and nobody wanted to buy it because I was the business. I mean, I had a team, I had a staff, and they were instrumental in the delivery of the services and everything, but my name and the agency's name were inextricably linked to each other. So if they were going to buy the agency, they were going to buy me too. I would have to been stuck with the agency with golden handcuffs. And I learned through that experience. I ended up getting pretty lucky in that I was able to move to New Zealand and keep that business going, and it didn't fall apart. I thought that 50-50 shot at maybe this business will survive me moving halfway around the world. And turned out that it worked great. I was able to hire a team of people. I had 8 people in New Zealand within like 6 months. We utilized some recruiters, and one of the first hires I made was a general manager who helped hire everybody else. So we really grew that side of the business, and with the exchange rate, it was somebody kind of told me it's like a Kiwi sweatshop. That sounds really derogatory, but it was an incredible value proposition to have people in New Zealand who are cutting edge, like early adopters, working on the bleeding edge stuff, and being able to offer them big brand projects based in the U.S., but working a block from the beach in New Zealand. And at 40 cents to the dollar in terms of the exchange rate at the time, it was an incredible deal all the way around. So it worked out, but I was prepared for it to not work out if that was the way it was going to go. And
this is actually, I have to pause you here because I feel like you've just like dropped insane value that we have to like make sure people heard. So like the first thing we have to go back is like exchanging Target for a testimonial, like building brand value early on. Practically, I was going to say, I bet it was worth doing the work for that testimonial.
Totally. I mean, I would have paid 50 grand to have had that opportunity to do all that free work for them. It was worth so much money.
Okay, so that's gold nugget number one, and big hint for all the agency owners out there, because it can make a huge difference having that type of brand power behind you. Then the second part is that you had that realization that your business isn't very saleable if it's tied to you, like it's practically someone buying a job. And it sounds like you learned that very early on, because many agency owners get way further down the track, desperate to sell it, and then don't have the time to make that change.
Yeah. It's like I would have needed to have planned at the beginning to build a business that that is standalone from me. And of course, I didn't know that at the time. I was so green at this stuff, having never had a business class or even a marketing class. And here I was thrusting myself into that agency world without any experience. Pretty crazy.
And then part 3, although this sounds a little bit like luck, a little bit, but I'm going to say it worked out really well, is that you were able to take advantage of a cheaper labor force. So able to find fantastic people in New Zealand. Like, I can only imagine how your competitors felt in the US, because you must have been able to go hard on pricing, put the squeeze on, keep service quality high. Even though you did have that distance from the USA, it ended up being a really big advantage being in New Zealand.
It was. And that, I don't know if that was luck. I won't call it luck. I'll call it good fortune.
We'll go that way.
Because I felt inspired to apply for residency, and I'd never been to New Zealand before. So that was really out there for somebody who was growing up in the Midwest and didn't travel that much outside of the States, to have this idea of like, well, why not move to New Zealand? And so I had young children at the time, and my wife at the time, and we all decided together that this would be a good move, but it all came from me and this intuition that it would be a great place to live. And it turned out to be incredible. And 7.5 years later, we moved back to the States in order for me to sell the business. And this time I was set up to sell it, and we did have a successful exit.
Which is just fantastic. And again, what an accomplishment. Like, huge congratulations there, because so many people get to that point and can never get out. So what a massive run. So I guess one of the questions I've been dying to ask in this is, how early on did your intention, I suppose, set in that you knew you were going to sell this business? You were going to sell it?
Once I tried to sell it the first time and I couldn't, nobody was interested if I didn't go with it. And then I realized that, wow, okay, I have no choice. I'm going to keep this business going. I'll trim it down to a skeleton crew in my Madison, Wisconsin office, and then promote the remaining few people to more key roles. In particular, my office manager became the managing director, and then building a team in New Zealand. And at that time, I knew that I needed, that was a big faux pas, that big mistake, that I built this business to not be saleable, and that I needed to correct that. So from that point forward, it was on my radar. It was I was fully alerted to the fact that I had built something that was not a standalone entity.
Fantastic. I really like that a lot. Now, when it came to selling the business then, when you look back on this whole experience, is there anything you would have done differently or earlier?
Oh, so many things I would have done differently. So I would have done the free testimonial thing a lot earlier. It took several years for me to get my first big brand client, like a home, like recognized brand that's in everybody's home, and that would be Birdseye. Birdseye Frozen Vegetables became a client in 1990. Was it 7 or 8? I think it was 8. So that was like 3 years after starting the business. And that was a game changer. That was a web development client. We started as a web development and design and marketing agency, and then SEO became a real area of focus starting in the late 90s. But through that whole time, and then even after that for the next until like 2007, when we finally sold that part of the agency, the web development side, along with our e-commerce platform that we had developed called Gravity Market, and our email platform called Gravity Mail. We sold those two off, and then the rest of the agency that was primarily just an SEO agency plus a software as a service, which that's a whole other game changer there, was to continue to hang our shingle out as an SEO consultancy agency, but then to have the engine room for our growth be a software as a service. So we had a SaaS model. The majority of our revenue was generated through this software called Gravity Stream. and it allowed us to charge on a cost per click basis, so pay for performance SEO, and it did an end run around all the technical hurdles that our clients had and prospects had around implementation, the amount of money and time it takes to implement, especially when you have a cumbersome, huge e-commerce platform. Like at the time, we had WebSphere, IBM WebSphere Commerce was really clunky and anti-SEO everything. Like it was just as bad as you could get from an SEO standpoint. Blue Martini was another horrible one. Like they were all just so badly designed for SEO that it was just it was easy pickings. And then when we had a software that they could use instead of trying to fix this convoluted monolithic platform, that was a wonderful fit. And they didn't know that that was even available to them. So if we had really doubled down on focusing on Gravity Stream as the brand and getting the word out that there's this reverse proxy based technology, that I think would have been a big mistake. So we tried to continue to compete with head to head with all the other big SEO agencies. And then when they come to us, they're like, well, we happen to also have this solution, which we think would be a good fit for you because it is going to take you probably 18 months and $1.5 million or whatever to implement based on what we're understanding of your constraints.
Yeah, you had like a little golden UVP sitting there, which is fantastic. I mean, even today, I think a lot of SEO agencies don't hold me to this. I don't know enough about all of them, but it's like, it seems to me the common trend is still like monthly retainer services for SEO.
Yeah,
there wouldn't be many
monthly retainer.
Yeah, there wouldn't be many pay by performance, and that's a very attractive offer, especially to these bigger brands.
And it's incredibly attractive to the agency too, if they get it right. We were able to get Zappos, for example, was paying us 7 figures a year for SEO with that platform. That's unheard of at those in those days for a retainer to get into the 7 figures. That was unheard of. And we also had Nordstrom as a client using Gravity Stream. We had such huge brands using that platform. And it seemed like a no-brainer to them because it was 15 cents a click. And you compare that with the click charges for AdWords at the time, it was a bargain. It was a win-win all the way around. And then we ended up generating, like I said, the majority of our revenue was coming from that agency. I mean, for the agency was coming from the pay-for-performance of Gravity Stream.
I feel like you just dropped another little nugget. We might have to call this episode Stephan's Nuggets. Just dropping gold everywhere here because it's fascinating that, you know, one of the things I really believe in the agency space is that if you are good at what you do, then the performance model is the way to go. Like it definitely has the most upside.
I agree with you. I think that whatever your niche is that you're trying to occupy, if it's a certain vertical that you're going after, or it's a particular set of services that you're offering, a particular whatever solution that you provide, that you have to be 100% aligned with their with getting the results for the clients. And if they're not getting the results, it should hurt. It should hurt your bottom line, not just being that the engagement will wrap up earlier than you would have expected or hoped, but that maybe you shouldn't even get paid if you're not delivering the results for the client.
Oh, that is a bold statement, but I agree. I really do.
Yeah.
I think the online marketing world would change dramatically for a lot of people and businesses if that was to follow and be the standard, so to speak. So I love that point of view.
I was just at Traffic and Conversion Summit, and one thing that Ryan Dice said that really stuck with me was that happy clients don't refer, successful clients refer. Right? So you could have somebody who, like, let's say you're a personal trainer and a really happy client who hasn't lost any weight. They're not going to be telling all their friends about you. But somebody who lost 50 pounds and they're in the best shape of their lives, and all their friends and family and say, like, what did you do? Who'd you go to? How did you get this result? They're not going to say, well, I'm not going to tell you. They're going to say what the secret was. And hopefully the secret is you and your agency, right?
Absolutely. That is such a great statement. Well played, Ryan Dice. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So go after the successful clients. And one thing that we knew that we could do for Target, because they were not doing so well with their SEO, let's just put it politely. We knew it would be a slam dunk. We would produce an audit that would make them cash like you wouldn't believe. Like it would be an ATM machine for them.
That was like the most politically correct way to say, no, that was just their SEO was trash. You handled that well. I'll pay that. But absolutely, like you're looking for those home runs, like because that's what's going to make them happy for you to use their logo.
That's right.
Another little nugget from Stephan there. So the next thing I wanted to dig into, I mean, we could go so many ways with this, but I really want to dig into the sale of the business now. Did you use a broker to sell the business, or how did you go about putting it to the market?
No, I hired an interim CEO because I'm not really CEO material of a bigger business. That's the thing that you got to recognize is that as you grow the business, you're probably going to not be able to grow your skills to that next level, right? So if you're really good at bootstrapping a business from nothing and getting it to 7 figures, which I'm excellent at that. I'm really, really good at that. You may not be excellent at growing a business from 7 figures to 8 figures. And I recognized that was not a good fit for me. Like that, I could probably figure it out, but it wouldn't be as effective as me just bringing in that talent. So that's what I did. Is I found somebody who had experience with larger sized companies and understood internet marketing and stuff. That wasn't just completely green. He wasn't from the agency world, but more from the software as a service world. But he really was a switched on guy, and the intention was that he would help us to broker the deal. That whoever the person that we would be negotiating with, if we didn't have somebody on our side of the table who was a very shrewd negotiator and has done this before, taken the road before, right? Knows where all the potholes are in that road, we would have gotten not nearly as good of a deal. Another thing that we knew too, that I knew from just like common sense, really, is that you'll get a better deal if you have competing bidders. So one of the first things I did when I got my first inquiry, a serious inquiry, was try to drum up another bidder within weeks. And I did. I was part of a CEO group of that Rand Fishkin, my co-author on The Art of SEO, one of my co-authors, he ran this CEO group of people in the SEO industry. I mentioned that we got an inquiry, and I'm curious if there anybody else that was interested, because now's the time. If you're interested in Netconcepts, this is the moment. And this was in a private conversation. It wasn't to the whole group of I think there were 12 or 13 of us in the group. I just had private side conversations, and one of those people said, I'm actually very interested. And so my company would like to put together an LOI, a letter of letter of intent. I was thinking letter of interest. No, letter of intent, and be considered for acquiring your company. So that was fabulous. What an incredible gift that was to have the other company that ended up being the acquirer, Cavario, for them to know that we had another party that was also interested at the same time.
And how did
Gave us
that
a lot
affect
more leverage.
the bidding? So how did that affect, I suppose, like, when it's a one-on-one negotiation with the sale of a business, you almost like expect to get lowballed. They're going to try and bring it down.
Of course. Yeah. So if you, but you run the danger of insulting the person. If you lowball whatever it is, if it's a used car that you want to buy and you lowball, you run the risk of insulting the person to the point where I just refuse to sell it to you now. You're dead to me. Get out, right? And that wonderful car that you fell in love with, that you thought, oh, I'm going to get a great deal on, is now off the market for you. Even if they're not going to sell it for another 2 months. So you got to be careful about that. But the other party, each party knew that there was another party. They didn't know who it was. They didn't know what their bids were, but and I wanted to be respectful of confidentiality and actually work to my benefit, I think, because it left the mystery and the curiosity factor there, instead of just saying, well, this is the offer that I got from the other party. So what your offer looks pretty tiny in comparison. I didn't have to say anything like that. I get to say, well, thank you for the offer. I can't tell you what the other offer is, but I can tell you that this is not exciting. What the number you're putting in front of me is not really. You're not going to get a deal.
It's like polite, but they're going to bring more.
Yeah.
What a strategic play, though, because I feel like we've almost brushed over this quickly, but it's like, because you've hired, you can be patient. It's not like this business is being a drain on you to this point. So it's not like you're working, 100-hour weeks, desperate to sell it. So you've got the ability to be patient in the sale. You've also got two bidders that don't know each other, and you can use this back and forth mentality. Like, this almost sounds like a power play for selling an agency. Like, this would be the ideal situation for any agency owner when they come to sell.
Yeah. And what you said just a minute ago is probably the most important thing for this entire episode. The part about desperation. If you're desperate, you've lost. You've already lost. If you, on the other hand, are patient and you don't have a time frame where the runway is going to run out, then you're in the power position. So how do you avoid desperation? You start thinking about this way ahead. Like, we always wanted to get more money available to us than we possibly needed. You always go to the bank or to different funding sources. And so there was this organization called Madison Development Corp. We were based in Madison, Wisconsin, in the U.S., and then in Auckland, New Zealand. And so we went to this organization called Madison Development Corp and said, we'd like to get a line of credit with you. And there were certain criteria that we had to meet and so forth. We didn't need the money. We weren't trying to acquire another company or hire 10 extra people or something. We just wanted to have that safety net. And we kept always going back to our bank to increase the line of credit, not constantly, but at least, let's say, once a year or so. And we'd always go when we didn't need the money, because that's when you look the most palatable to the banks, is when you don't look like you're in desperation mode. So you get the money when you don't need it.
I like the mentality towards preparedness. Like, that really, I suppose, it has been striking in this conversation, is after that experience of trying to sell the business and basically getting nothing, like, people could see it was a job and you didn't have perhaps what they wanted to see at that point. But from there is that you got very, very prepared for this moment over a number of years. So with financing, availability to cash, the team and people, awareness of your own skill set, going, right, from 7 to 8 figures, someone else is actually better suited to be the interim CEO. That's going to position us better. So some
Yeah.
really powerful lessons there.
Well, I mean, that it's almost like this is a social media post. Like, this is your put your best foot forward. Like, wow, you're on a yacht, and this Instagram picture and so forth. You have an amazing life, but it wasn't all easy, and I didn't make all the right calls. And one of the impetuses for me to sell at the time, even though we moved back to the States in order for us to position the business to sell, because we'd be able to exit for more money if the founder were based in the States instead of halfway around the world, and I knew that. But then a year later, my wife at the time tells me that we're going to get a divorce, and I did not know that. I did not plan for that. A huge gift, and in retrospect, I'm now married to my soulmate, and I'm incredibly happy, 10x happier than I ever had been, and at the time when it was felt like my life was crashing and around me, and I wanted to exit the business, I had to keep a stiff upper lip and really keep my composure, because I was very unhappy at the time, and that was impetus for me to, it was, like I said, huge gift. It was an impetus for me to not only sell my business, but also to completely transform myself, to do a life reboot. And if you look at I have photos, before and after photos of me on my Get Yourself Optimized podcast, and also on stephanspencer.com on my About page. And you can see that on the getyourselfoptimized.com site, and then the before and after is shocking. Like, you wouldn't recognize that previous version of me. I looked like 15 years older, and that photo was a decade ago. Like, how does that work? You watched Benjamin Button and then you decided to do that? Kind of. And it all started with getting to the very bottom of I don't know, depression is maybe a little strong of a word, but I was certainly unresourceful and unhappy and unfulfilled, going through a divorce, and just like not really, kind of rudderless, really. On the outside, I had a successful business and it all looked great, and I was in the process of selling the business, and I was really in a bad place. So that was a great gift. That the pain kind of slapped me around the face and woke me up. And then I went to a Tony Robbins event. 3 different people told me, you got to go to this thing. I didn't even know who Tony Robbins was, some infomercial guy, right? And I walked on hot coals and my bare feet. I didn't get burned. And I'm like, wow, if I can do that, I can certainly change my life, go to the gym and change my diet, and get LASIK and stop wearing glasses, get a hair transplant and all that. I did all of that, and then I became unrecognizable, and I'd still speak at these conferences, SEO conferences, and then people wouldn't recognize me, which was really fun. I'd go into a group of people and just be hanging out there, and they wouldn't recognize me for 10, 15 minutes, and then I would tell them who I was, and they would be like, oh my God. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, quite a transformational experience. So I suppose to throw the timeline in, so this kind of like after you sold the business, and I imagine there was some sort of like handover period or earn out period where you were still involved or handing over things. But after that,
Very
it
short.
sounds like, how short?
Yeah, 6 months.
That is very short and unusual.
I did not want a long earnout, because you've got a job. That earnout, the golden handcuffs, are usually positioned as something like, well, we want to make sure that we're protecting our asset and everything. No, it's not an asset acquisition then. It is an employment contract. Why would you work for somebody else? You're the entrepreneur. You're the creator of, you're the manifester of ideas into reality. Why would you be working for the man? I mean, I literally was working for the man for those 6 months. A guy named Russ Mann. He was the CEO of Cavario.
Oh my God, I knew I was the best name for that. That is so good.
I knew that this was not what I wanted to do, and so that's why I negotiated hard for a minimal earnout. And surprisingly, he was surprised when I told him I'm leaving. As soon as the check cleared, out the door.
Well, I suppose that chimes into a few things we've referenced earlier, though. So, I mean, for those on the podcast, like I've been through a similar experience to Stephan, where I've been involved with selling parts of one of my agencies, and then I've seen other people and friends sell theirs. What's typical and what I see really commonly is between about 18 months they hang around for after the sale. And the reason for that is that whoever has bought the agency often seems to think that the clients will leave once that person is gone. So this is their way of retaining and making sure that, I suppose, the business functions as it should. And I understand this point of view because I think for a lot of agencies, it's probably true. If they leave, things would go a little bit sideways. There'd be very few that didn't have some impact. So well negotiated. And it sounds like you had a very good software stance and UVP, which probably made it even easier to get those terms.
Yeah, for sure. And I would point that I would make the point that if your business is susceptible to a loss of a lot of the clients because you're not going with the acquisition, you have not built a proper business. That you've if you are required for the business to retain its customer base, then you are self-employed. You're not a business owner.
Definitely. Old Robert Kiyosaki, the cash flow quadrant, changed my life many, many years ago, but it's so, so true. And I think a danger zone for a lot of agency owners.
Yeah. I loved his book. I didn't read the cash flow quadrant, but I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was a game changer for me too.
Oh, another great one. I heavily endorse Robert's work. I think he's such a unique thinker, although probably less contrarian these days than it was way back then. Now, we jumped topics, but I want to make sure we cover this before we wrap this episode up. So the agency sold, you had a 6-month, I'll call it earn out or hang around period, if you will. And then it sounds like you very much went on a personal journey after then, more of the internal work, doing the Tony Robbins and getting involved in, I suppose, creating a transformation for yourself. What happened next?
Well, I started another consultancy and decided it wouldn't be the traditional kind of agency route, that I would provide the account management, which in retrospect, I don't know how great of an idea that was. I certainly was able to charge premium prices. I was probably one of the most expensive SEO consultants that you could hire. But I mean, it's like that. If you were to hire somebody like Rand Fishkin, there isn't actually an amount that you could hire him for, I don't think, to do SEO consulting for you. But at the time that he was still offering his time, if you paid enough money, that was many, many, many years ago when it was still called SEO Moz, before it was called Moz.com. It was well into the 4 figures per hour. And if you're that good, and I'm that good, then people should pay for the value that you deliver, and not an hourly rate. And they should be able to get direct access to you and not go through many filters of management or account management. Like having essentially an order taker. Like, oh, that's a great question. Let me get back to you on that. So I wanted to avoid the pitfalls of a traditional agency, but then I created essentially the opposite of what I'm proposing here, is that it needs to be able to stand alone and be an asset that doesn't need you. And what I created was a lifestyle business that was essentially being self-employed, but gave me tons of freedom. So I was able to travel the world, spend like half of a month traveling and the other half working. And I did this for years. I did the Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership for 3 years, and that was like $130,000 a year to be part of that program. And I was also doing other programs as well. I met really cool people, and it really catapulted my life, my progress, the trajectory of things. Just catapulted it to have access to these amazing people and these amazing uh, transformational ideas and so forth. But yeah, it was a very different kind of company, and I still run that, and I'm kind of shifting the business model of that currently, which we'll have to save for another episode, I think.
Yeah, well, I would love to have you back on for part two because basically everyone I know that knows anything about SEO tells me you're the man, tells me that you are at the absolute tip of the iceberg when it comes to SEO knowledge and one of the best, if not the best in the world on the topic. So I would definitely love to have a part two where we dive deeper into the SEO and tactical things, which I hope you're up for. But I think you've
Of course.
delivered a wealth of value today to agency owners.
I'm happy to come back. Happy to deliver lots of value. I believe that it's not a zero sum game. That business is a spiritual game, and that business karma is a real thing. Like if you give without the requirement of getting something back, like if you're just a good human in the world, and that if I help somebody else be better at SEO with their agency, that's not going to take money out of my pocket, right? It doesn't mean that somebody who's listening to this podcast is going to get enough value that they'll be able to steal a client away from me or something. That's very limited thinking. And yeah, I want everybody to play business like it's a spiritual game.
What an interesting concept. If you'd have said that to me, let's say a year into business, I would have said, this guy's crazy, in all honesty. But this far into the game, I probably tend to sit on more of that side of the fence. I actually tend to agree with you on that. The deeper I go, the more I realize it's just a mind game or a spiritual game in this sense here. Like there's less logicalness to it than appears.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to ask or to have a conversation with me, let's say 10, 15 years ago, and talk about these concepts, I would have thought you're crazy. What? You're like a spiritual game? I was agnostic before the transformation I went through and doing all the Tony Robbins stuff and everything. I wouldn't even say that I believed in God. I was dubious. I borderline atheist for my whole life. And everything shifted once I started getting involved with all the personal development stuff, and in particular, this one trip to India that I took in 2012 just opened me. I had a great physical transformation in 2009, 2010, but then the spiritual transformation I had in 2012 totally eclipses that physical transformation.
Geez, we might even have to set up a part three of this conversation on the basis of that. That is what a hook. Now, Stephan, where is the best place people can come and learn more about you on all fronts here? Agency, SEO, podcast. What's the best place to send people to?
Okay. So stephanspencer.com is my main website, and that's where you'll find links to my podcasts. I have 2 shows. Also, my books are there. There's a whole library of resources, a learning center that you can check out. And if you want to go direct to my 2 podcasts, which I highly recommend, of course, Get Yourself Optimized. You can just find that in your favorite podcast app. So that's my personal development, biohacking, life hacking, productivity podcast. I've had Tim Ferriss on, and David Allen, and Dave Asprey, and all the really cool people who are doing stuff and up-leveling people's lives. And then the other podcast, Marketing Speak, is my online marketing podcast, which has also had some really big guests on it too, like Seth Godin and Dan Kennedy, and Jay Abraham's been on a couple times. Yep.
Oh, fantastic. And I'll make sure to include all links in our show notes. But I wanted to say a massive thank you, Stephan. So many goodies shared today. So big thank you for coming onto the show.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be of service, and I hope this makes a difference for people. And I always end my episodes with an invitation for the listener to like get up and do something, take some action, because otherwise this is just ear candy. It's like, oh, this is fun. I really enjoy working out to hearing Stephan and some really interesting guests. No, just apply this knowledge. Otherwise, it's just I'm not going to say the mental something with an M word. So.
But that's points for political correctness again. Just nailing the politeness. Right. All right. So obviously massively endorse. And anyone that is listening, I agree. Like, sell your agency. Don't be gun shy here. Like, on the back of this, make the decision, set it up and sell it. That's the move.
Yeah.
All right, Stephan, thank you so much for being on the show. This is wrapping up this episode for Agency Valley today. That's it from us, guys.